appreciate that. So I'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock on February 22nd, 2021. Josh, if you could just do a quick roll call.
Sure. All right, Matt,
Yep.
Casey,
Here.
Ken,
Yep.
Michael,
Michael me or Michael McDermott?
McDermott, sorry.
Yep.
Jimmy.
Yep.
Norman,
Yes.
Peter,
Yeah.
Casey,
Here.
I think I got everyone. I missed anyone?
John Schatz is here.
Don.
You get Jimmy?
Yeah, I have Jimmy.
Okay. All right, so we're good?
Yep.
All right, awesome. All right, so moving on to next item on the agenda is public comment. So I do see that Carlton's here and Anthony, so I would just open it up, raise your hand or just unmute yourself if you have anything that you want to add before we get started. Carlton's out, you're just listening? I don't.
Just listening.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. Thank you for attending tonight. We appreciate you guys coming to listen to the committee and what we have to talk about tonight. Next item on the agenda, everybody got in the email, was the minutes from our last meeting, so I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Who's that? Ken? Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Josh, will that be all set so you don't have to go through a roll call vote?
Actually, I will have to go through a roll call.
Okay. All right,
Hey, Matt,
yes.
Michael McDermott,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
John. Sorry, John, I saw you speak, but I didn't hear you.
Still not hearing you, Johnny.
It's unmuted.
Oh, there we go.
Norman,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Jimmy,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion was approved.
Thank you, Josh. Next item on the agenda is what I wanted to do is just really open up a discussion based on the emails that we got before with the list of public property. So as everybody on the committee knows, we did put out an RFP looking for private property that met certain criteria that we would evaluate. In talking to Michael, I felt as though that is still a ways down the road when the RFP is due in. And I don't suppose in this real estate market that we'll actually have people respond to that. So in an effort not to delay a failed RFP for private property, I felt as though let's keep moving along with the public property, and that's property the town owns. So we had the list that was sent out a while ago, thanks to Michael and his staff for producing this list of town-owned property. But I think that what we need to do tonight, and I would entertain a conversation if Brian wanted to just help us with that, but I think we need to narrow it down to what's reasonable for Brian to then take to the next level, which is to evaluate those sites for feasibility. So we might look at something that seems really, really good. And right now, to me, 1185 Pleasant Street is sort of, in my mind, one of our best options out on 104. But in the end, it might not turn out to be a feasible site. So in my thought process, and anybody that wants to speak up, please do so. We need to plan for a 3-station concept But if that doesn't work between private and public property options, then we're talking about a long drawn out process for eminent domain, which is, I don't think both the public perception we want to do that, and nor do we want to delay this further down the road. Economically, right now, we're in the best financial position we could be to be coming before the town to ask for this project to get approved. And Michael can probably explain some of the financial options that we have been able to mitigate with the elementary school building project. It saved the town considerable amount of money. So I feel even more confident that when we get a proposal before the town, that it's likeliness to get approved. So we need to start vetting the properties. I need to hear particularly from the fire chief and from the fire department about your particular thoughts on the pieces of property, and whether or not they would work for your operation. I look at the property on Elm Street and think, it's available land out on that side, but I know the chief has reservations about it. And, certainly we look at Prospect Street Fields, sort of the same thing. So I guess what I would ask is maybe if Brian could help us first to understand what we want to be doing in this conversation, and then maybe if Michael Dutton has anything to add to that process, and then we can try to open it up for a full-on discussion. Brian, I hate to put you on the spot, but thank you for coming tonight.
Good to see you again. Good to see the committee again. We're kind of just sitting on our hands right now as far as what we've been tasked to do. I've taken the draft off of the space needs assessment because you've endorsed that document. And so we're on to the second piece of what we've been asked to do. And a lot of times this tends to be the hardest piece. It tends to be the hardest because there's not a lot of nice developable parcels that are left in a lot of these communities. And the parcels that are left for a reason. And the reason could be they're not even buildable or they're not suitable. So trying to find a suitable site is always a challenge. And that's why I was glad that you put out the RFP. While you may find that it doesn't drive any parcels, it still gives you something you could check off for the community to say you did it. So even though you don't get a response, I think the fact that you put the RFP out is a good nod to the community that you at least made that effort. But obviously town-owned property is your best first look, just because land acquisition costs. I wouldn't be scared of land acquisition costs if you find that all of your town-owned land is not suitable, because to make it suitable, you might be pouring a lot of money into it versus just going out and purchasing a suitable parcel. So don't be scared of land acquisition costs, but looking at town-owned property is always your best first look. So that's what we have on this list. The only parcel that I've been made aware of was the Hale Street property, and I don't see that even on this list. So that was a question I had. But you have to come up with properties that you feel are viable and suitable, and let us then do the drilling down to find out. And that's not physical drilling down, but that's just looking at data to find out how suitable those are. But I wouldn't say, give me a piece of property that you don't even want to have a fire station on. If you know these properties, you know the community, some of these might be residential settings, some of these might be parkland, some of them might be just discarded parcels that wouldn't be suitable for me to spend time on, because everybody knows that you're just not putting a fire station there. So I should be looking at parcels that you think are viable, and you want me to then test them to see how viable or not they are. If you're looking at the 3 station scenario that we talked about, locations are critical. And I think for the station 3, you're going to want at least 1.5 acres. And for the headquarters station, you're going to want at least 2.5 acres. So just kind of a guide. That's not a strong maximum or minimum, that's just a guide to where we think we need to put all of the site needs and space needs that you've asked for onto these parcels. So we're encouraged to get this list down to maybe 2, 3, 4. And then you're going to have to designate, is this going to be looked at for a substation, or is this going to be looked at for a headquarters, or is this going to be looked at for maybe a combination, headquarters and Station 3? So does that help, Matt?
Yes, no, thank you very much, Brian. So we excluded Hale Street. I guess in my thought process, this is just town-owned land on this list that we're looking at today. I would put Hale Street in the private property category, because if the site becomes a feasible site, we still would have to hammer out an agreement, just like purchasing a piece of private property from the university. And so I think that it would be on the short list, but I'll just ask Michael if there's been any updates from BSU, or at least help the committee to understand their level of interest if it's a feasible site.
No, thanks, Matt. And I guess the short answer is yes, there has been interest from BSU. Obviously, everybody, certainly BSU and everybody's wrapped up in a whole lot of other things right now. But I did have a discussion with President Clark probably about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago at this point. They do have an interest. Excuse me, they have no current plan for that piece of property. And they're willing to have that discussion about, how we could use that property in conjunction with BSU. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. So I guess at this point, I would sort of just open it up to just general conversation. I don't know, maybe it might make sense to just work down the list and either include them in a short list or completely eliminate them, so we can just eliminate them from the idea that they're a potential site. So if that seems like it makes sense, I see some head bob, and I can go ahead and do that. So if we're looking at 0 Crescent Street, in other words, known as the softball fields, Chief, give me some feedback, or anybody from the fire department. What's your thoughts on that? I know that was sort of an idea that's been pitched from Chief Levy from the outset as a potential site. And I think it has high potential. I think that we could possibly replicate that out on Swift Ave, what's currently there, if we in fact take anything away. But what are your thoughts on, I've had real concerns about the apparatus actually getting out on that road, out onto 104, and how do we widen that with property so close to the roadway and a church on one side? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think just what you said, Matt, part of the difficulty is we have to go through 5 sets of lights going out to the highway, even if that was used as the headquarters station in that setup. If we're building a second station right now, one of our things that we want the most is to lessen the response to the western part of the community, where a large portion of construction is going on out there, in the business base. So both residential and business being put out in that location. I know a number of our personnel have gone out and walked the property at 1185. I wouldn't say that Crescent Street would be bad, but that would be in a three station scenario, not a 2-station scenario. And then I think we come back into, if you're going to do 3 stations, you're going to have 3 stores, you need more personnel to run the stores. So it's kind of a catch-22. Could we use all 3 stations? No doubt. In the perfect world. Could we use more personnel? In the perfect world? Yes. Is it going to happen right now? Probably not.
Okay, so let's talk about Crescent Street. Keep it on the short list.
It definitely has its options, but as far as the second station in a 3-station process, if that was the one that's built, we're not gaining anything going that direction, I don't think.
So just so I understand, you don't think it's far enough west, the physical location?
Again, if in a 3-station process, it would be fine. In a 2-station process, we're not getting that extra spread the distance. We're still very close to the center to be working from. Plus, we're coming in and out of residential area, pulling the trucks. We're still going through the same lights without a straightaway. Now we're taking corners, lefts and rights.
So
Okay.
Matt, we keep it on the list, but we push it down on the list. It's not one of the preferred sites, I would say.
Definitely. Definitely. The other thing would be in that scenario, if we were going to try to centrally locate our tower truck, that would also be a large piece of apparatus coming out on basically residential streets. Even though they're a little bit wider than some of the ones we deal with, they're not that much wider.
So I guess I would just shoot it back to Brian just to help us when we're trying to narrow these down. You're hearing obviously discussions that we have about the site location is maybe a good location, but logistics around it, getting apparatus in and out. Is that stuff we should be worried about in this conversation, or that stuff that you would say, the site's buildable, but it's got, you'd be $1 million into opening up access to it?
Yeah, I would keep it on the list. And if you find that you have maybe 5 that seem to be viable, maybe then you look at number 5 and then consider whether it should stay or not.
Okay.
But for discussion purposes, if it's Crescent Street and only one other or 2 others, then you might as well have us look at it.
Okay.
Matt,
All right,
I had a question for you real quick. Just, do you mind if I ask a question? Everybody's probably on the same page from the fire side, a 3-station concept versus a 2-station concept. So I'm wondering if we could put certain addresses in the 3-station concept. And then obviously, if we can't go down the 3-station concept route, they automatically just get eliminated. You know what I mean? Where we can just probably keep stuff that works in a 2-station process. You know what I mean? Like on the board and the very high top list. That's just an idea. I don't know if.
Well, that might work if you just want to start looking at where Station 3 could be an option, and then work backwards from that.
So
There's only a few of these are on the west part of the town.
how difficult a process is it to confirm Mac's suspicion that 3 might not be approved? Is there a way that we can put that out to a vote and say, holy crap, it got approved? Because that totally changes what we're talking about here in terms of site locations. If 3 gets approved, then shouldn't we be planning for 3? If 3 doesn't get approved and we're going to be looking at 2, does that impact this discussion critically?
So I'll answer that one. I think Ken's point is actually a good one. Excuse me. And I think one of the challenges, municipal government has is you can't always, get the pulse of the community. If this is ultimately a decision that the community is going to have to make as part of the debt exclusion, then, it's going to have to be further down the road than right now. So I think this committee is in the, difficult, most communities aren't facing this kind of decision. So we are in the difficult position of having to make some recommendations, which presupposes that the community is going to buy into it. So going back to Jimmy's point about, prioritizing, okay, this would be an okay option for a 3-station solution. This would be an okay option for, 2-station solution, and kind of identify them that way. Kind of makes a lot of sense, just so that as we go along, obviously we can give Brian the information that he needs and the direction he needs, but as we go along, if there's any indication that there's no way that the voters would ever go along with a 3-station solution, then at that point we could drop them off. But I think at this stage, we sort of have to look at all of them with either or in mind. Absent, doing, like a ballot question, a non-binding ballot question. And quite honestly, you're left at the whim, everybody's going to come out for a debt exclusion vote, presumably. Only a handful of people are going to come out for a ballot question, a non-binding, ballot question vote. So it's kind of a tough call, but I think, I think we, in our minds at least, we have to keep the 2-station and the 3-station kind of active until we get some very clear indication that that's one of them is one or both are not going to work, or maybe they'll all work. So that's the tough position for the committee to be in.
I think the biggest thing that has to be looked at in something like this isn't just the station. The station is only it's a bond for a 20-year period. The personnel that man that station are what's necessary. And is it justifiable with the construction we have going on right now? You can justify 3 stations, but is it going to happen? And I think we have to take a realistic look that if it's not going to happen right now, it probably will happen in the future. And we have to plan for that accordingly, looking at what we're looking at and making those decisions now. Knowing that we might be looking at a Hale Street, a Spring Street, a Pleasant Street, or a Crescent Street property as a 3rd station location if we build on the west side of the community.
I think if we continue our program of doing the feasibility study, we're going to give you a lot of good information at the end of that you'll be much more knowledgeable on costs of the building. You'll know what costs of personnel would be going forward. It's money, but it's small money compared to the cost of construction versus us having a design put together. So I would encourage you to continue to look at a 2-station, 3-station, keep your mind open and let the sites in the designs with their cost give you that information at the end of what we're asked to do. And I think you'll have a clearer idea of what the overall cost of the town would be at that point, instead of now that we're in site selection. I think it's too early to just abandon a 3-story scheme.
And again,
Yeah.
I'm not abandoning it. I'm trying to look at it realistically that those 3 stations have to be manned.
Yep.
And that means more to our budget, more to our manning. So I also want to look at it logistically that this is what's needed to do that. I'm all for everything you just said, but I also want to be realistic about what we're looking at and what we can pull off with what we have now.
Yeah, I can fully understand it's going to cost money, but I just see these projects 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's going to make today's dollar and interest rates look very favorable versus, the costs are only going to go up.
And hear me, everything you're saying, I agree with. The difficulty is I sat and looked at Station 2 when it was closed for 3 or 4 years without anybody in it because of just what we're talking about. And that also didn't go, it was like a political shot for everything that was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hear everything you're saying, Chief, and I appreciate everything you're saying. I think in my mind, we would probably have to have a meeting down the road of, what a staffing plan looks like with a 3-station concept and what the impact is and what you'd need to do that. I think at this stage, I'm fearful that we can't just rebuild a downtown station, that we physically don't have the space, nor is there any private property either for sale or even a position to take unless it's state owned, and that's just not going to happen for us. So it leaves us with, how do we replace the downtown fire station? And I think that we're in a position right now that in the end, that a 3-station concept, 2 smaller new stations is going to meet the long-term needs of the town. And given interest rates and construction costs right now, maybe on the front end, we're able to absorb an initial salary impact on employment side, in order to get enough firefighters to get that running. So I think that's what we'll find in the end. I hear what everybody's saying. I just don't think that there's any available space. In a perfect world, I would like to see us attached onto the PD and have a public safety complex right in that location that, in my opinion, would serve the needs of the entire town, being right there on 104, close to both ends and easy access. I don't think it's feasible. So we're back to, what are the available small lots left in the town of Bridgewater that are buildable that we can get something on? And if it results in us having to add staff, I know people don't want to hear that, but ultimately, if it's going to improve the safety of the town, I mean, ultimately that's our goal, right? So we're going to have residents out by the NIP, and we're going to be able to show them in a presentation at some point that if you're suffering a medical emergency right now, it could be anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes to get somebody to your door.
And
When we're-
Matt, everything you're saying, you already have me on board. My thought process isn't that. My thought process is it will not be accepted by the public. And I don't want to lose the bird in the hand for the two in the bush.
Yeah. Well, I guess, as we get further along, we'll have to step up presentations at the town council meetings to get the councilors on board so they can respond to questions in town. And, once Brian's done with his assessment, again, work on that next step. What is that impact? I mean, I don't know what we're talking about. We talking about $4 million a year? Are we talking about $500,000? I don't know. That's your business. So you'd have to come up with those numbers, but I think Brian and Michael could help us with that. And then at that point, as a committee, I think we make a decision, do we go back to 2 station? Are we talking about renovating the downtown station and not moving at all? That's not where I want to go. But if we can't get anything done, and I might be speaking out of terms of just, these are the thoughts that are popping in my head on the project, but I'm not sure if Michael wants to add anything to it.
No, I would agree with that completely. I think the challenge, and obviously we're straying a little bit off of
Yeah.
looking at the sites, but I think the challenge is building consensus. So you can, most of the time you can get a vote out of the townspeople if you are very clear about explaining why you need something and why it's important. So building, sort of a campaign around, why you need something is really critical. So trying to guess right now whether the town would vote it or not, we all do that. I do that all the time. But, there's really a lot of work to do between now and actually getting to a town vote. And I'm presuming that we need a town vote. But by the time we get to a town vote, there's a lot of work to be done to demonstrate the need, demonstrate why this, whatever solution we come up with is the correct solution, and educating people. Really that's what it's all about, is just constant education, so that people, when the fire station pops into their head, immediately they know that our current facility is just abominable, and there's a solution on the table that would solve, the problem for the next 50 years. So that's really, in Bridgewater and most towns, that's what people want to hear. You thought out the solution. Well, you identified the problem, you thought out the solution, you're presenting something that's going to solve the problem for the next 50 years. And honestly, it's as simple as that. And where a lot of towns stumble is they're not clear about, first they're not clear about the problem. So they wallow around, I think in this case, anybody that's been in it, pictures are the best case for what the problem is, right? So I think we've got that one covered. Proposing the solution is where towns tend to stumble, because they say, okay, here's the solution, and then they all go back home. Well, once you come up with a solution, you have to really explain the solution over and over and over again until people are blue in the face. People draw the comparison with the Mitchell School. I can't tell you how many presentations I went to with the Mitchell School, and I was kind of expecting a big crowd to show up. And honestly, there were presentations where we had 2 people. We had like 10 people in the room ready to give a presentation to 2 people. And I thought, oh, this doesn't bode well at all. But, in retrospect, it actually did. People heard it once in some forum, and they were satisfied. They went away. So it just, you're constantly at it and you're constantly, making the case and explaining to people and answering every single question and being completely transparent. I mean, I think once you do that, you get to the point where people will buy into the solution that you're proposing, but they just need all that information.
And I apologize too. We did get a little off track, and we'll focus back on the actual sites, but it is discussions that we have to have. And to that point, the fourth item on the agenda later tonight was really talking about, standing up a Facebook page and a town website that has all this information and starts to get it out to people and sort of counters some of the arguments, or at least sees, what is the public thinking as we put these plans together and how do we counter those? So I'll go on to the next one, which was Star Road, which honestly I didn't give
Can I
much.
just throw, can I
Oh,
just
yeah,
throw
sure.
another thing in there,
Yeah.
Matt?
Yep.
Maybe this will help work towards Michael's goal of making this explainable to the public. So as we go through these things and we hear from the fire chief and fire personnel on this committee, it would be helpful to me to say, okay, XYZ Main Street in a 2-station model, this is an 8 out of 10. In a 3-station model, this is a 10 out of 10. Like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to gauge these the way we're currently communicating about them. So is there any sort of table or metric or system we can put around that?
So are you talking about what they did years ago with the circles in the community with a 3-mile radius to do a response from station to station or response from station to the outskirts?
No, what I'm saying is, as you're giving your feedback, chief, and you're saying, well, this is feasible. If it's gonna be a 2-station model, I would grade this location as an 8.5 out of 10 to suit the fire department's needs. If we're looking at this same location as part of a 3-station model, I actually grade this site a 10 out of 10. I don't have, when I'm hearing the discussion on these different locations, I'm having a hard time judging how suitable or not suitable they might be.
I agree as well, as if we can get the hump out of the way with what we're trying to show the public on what works the best for us right out the gate. Because if we're kind of at odds where we want stations, the public's just gonna, I totally agree with that. We need to put priority on a certain properties on the list.
So just as for a suggestion, the list you're looking at is, we took all of, I'm pretty sure it was 2.5 acre, 2.5 acre or more, might have been 2.75 or more, but regardless. And with what we thought was, we don't have wetland data on all of these parcels, but we took 2.5 acres, which we thought had some upland area, and then unencumbered by something else, for the most part. So you'll very quickly see if you look at the assessor's maps, or Tim Donovan actually sent out sort of a Google map. If you look at that, you'll realize that some of these properties, probably a good half of them are just completely inappropriate. So, right. But I, in the interest of being, thorough, and not exclude anything, I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw them. And I don't know if everybody got Tim's Google map.
They're actually shaded too with the original green list. And I think that's, for me, as part of this committee, when residents come back to us and ask, oh, did you look at this? Did you look at that? This here in the meeting minutes, and when this meeting's concluded, we have looked at every feasible town-owned site that we could possibly look at that met the basic criteria of at least 2.5 acres or more. So as we kind of pile through this list, I think that in my head, yes, we will be down to 3 or 4 locations. And then, if the chief has any objections where he thinks, like, for example, Elm Street is on this list. He's not in favor of that. He's spoken to me about his concerns about that. It's not going to be on the list. It's not a feasible site at this time. whether it's 2 or 3 stations. So that's where I'm hoping to be tonight. So we can say we've evaluated everything.
Got it.
So if we're looking at Star Road, Chief, I looked at that. I don't know. I'm assuming because it's on this list, it has buildable land, but you know, I certainly like the potential of that site as a 2-station concept because it has enough land to put a larger downtown, so to speak, fire station or headquarters. And we could certainly make minor road improvements, including traffic lights off of Star Road and 104. So any thoughts on that particular site?
No, Matt, I don't, to be honest.
Okay. Jimmy, what do you guys think in terms of a site location? If it had traffic lights similar to PD at the end of Star Road, but it looks like it's like a retreat lot. So could envision sort of a short road and then the site opens up. You'd be backed up to the girls' softball fields, the way it lays out.
I've walked a lot of the properties that we've talked about.
Okay.
To be honest with you, if we were going to go anywhere on 104, it would probably most likely be what we're talking about with the Reese property, or maybe even I know there was some discussion like tucked in behind Cumberland Farms there, across the street. I know everybody's kind of up in arms about Prospect Street and embedding into a neighborhood, so I can totally understand that. I think the idea maybe if we can stay on the main drag and be on the west side. It's just tough because there's nothing. I know where you're getting at, Matt, because and the same with the chief. It's tough because you want to look at something centrally located, but also on the west side, which is almost impossible on a 2-station concept with the properties that we're listing. But if I had to pick anything that we're talking about on 104, Star Road's not up there on my list. It's you can mark that off. I mean, I would definitely probably most likely go with Reese property or behind Cumberland Farms.
Okay, so 47, 128. All right, the only reason I particularly liked this location is that ultimately if we come to a 2-station concept, it gets all of the apparatus out of the mess of downtown and having to navigate out of downtown. It puts you on 104 the second there's a call. You just got that short distance on Star Road. And if we had traffic lights and you've got 10 acres of land back there. So I kind of like that. But if nobody's feeling the site, if we were in a 2-station concept, we'll cross it from the list, but at least we know it's available and it's 10 acres of land.
And I think the biggest thing with that is we run into the same problem we'd run into on Prospect Street or Crescent Street. We're still heavily involved in a residential area, and then making those entrances and exits onto a main road with the speeds. That's a straightaway, both shots for at least a half a mile coming north or going west, and 3/4 of a mile going east without anything stopping them. At some point, we've had somebody hit the store right there 3 times. It's just an accident waiting to happen.
Okay. All right, so eliminate 128. How about Elm Street, 5845?
I think, again, we run into what we've looked at before with Elm Street. You have Lucini's bus line that is out there. That's morning and afternoon, heavy traffic. You have a warehouse that has 65 bay doors. So even if you put a trailer in every other one, that's 32 trailers a day. You have FW Web that's opening up, closing their Brockton office, opening up their main office in this area, South Shore. That's also going to be heavily traveled, along with First Street Industrial, along with the 3 pot plants and the other construction companies that are running off Elm. I think we'd be in a similar problem in a road that has been definitely updated, but it's not updated for the traffic that's coming.
Okay, so your concern would be just access in and out of the site and onto 104?
Exactly, Matt. The traffic that's going to hit that road at certain times of the day would cause us nothing but headaches.
Okay. All right, anyone else on that site? All All right, how about 1185 Pleasant?
I'll be honest, we walked it. I was very impressed. It wasn't as wet as I thought it would be. It was a lot higher than I thought it would be. And it was farther away from the electrical lines as far as for electromagnetic than I thought it was. Plus with landscape distance and shielding from trees and other natural barrier.
Okay, so it's, we've got a site, potential site there. Anyone else?
This was my favorite location by far as well. I look at it, we'd like to have 3 stations, but let's just say, like Chief McDermott, his concern is that we can only get 2 right now. That location, you cover your west side, Station 2 is covering your east side, and ideally you'd like to have your downtown. Let's say we don't get it. At least you have 2 stations now. From either side, you can attack the middle. And then like we've talked about, you got 13 to 14,000 residents in the middle. So, if we're building for the next 50 years, at least we can attack the middle of the center of the town for now with 2 stations and build a 3rd station in the center someday. But I think that location provides a good start point.
Matt, the other question in regards to what Casey just brought up, if we're looking at a central station or a station in the middle, the station in the middle doesn't have to be in the center of our community. It could be on Route 18, which would have direct access and also sub-access off to South Street, off to Summer Street, and would also be able to come in the backside of the college. So Route 18 is not far from what a 3-station process would look like. I know we're tight in the center and everything that's trying to be developed and utilized, but Route 18 also has a South Business District that if it's ever hooked up to sewage and opened up, that would be a lot more property down in that area that would also expand exponentially. So a 3rd station could be there, still giving us the Central Business District access, still giving us the access to those 13,500 people that live at the college and work at the college, but at the same time, able to cover on both sides.
Okay. I don't think we have anything, we got 0 Bedford Street. I have to look at the map when I get there, but I would agree that, at least in my opinion, this is a very promising site for that side of town.
Matt, just to touch on the traffic too. I mean, if you look at just if we utilize that property, I mean, you got enough spacing from the Prospect Street lights to all the way to the Elm. You're not going to be very congested. You're going to coming into 2 sets of lights, and you'll see the station. So obviously the station will have some type of lighting to get on to Route 104. It just makes, I mean, hopefully it's not as wet as we're determining, and because it does, it makes a perfect spot for, you're not going to be as congested when you get an apparatus out on the road.
Nice. All right, so there's 2 lots here, 82, 5, and 7 at the NIP. Any thoughts? I mean, it looks like they're not feasible locations or lots.
The only 2 things that I heard in regards to, and I know those are town owned, could those be traded off with a lake shore? And again, that's putting us at the furthest possible point out, or almost the furthest possible point. Now we have to fight the same lights we're talking about fighting going out of town, coming back into town. In the traffic at 4 o'clock on a regular evening during college session in the fall or the spring is chock-a-block from Route 24 all the way to South Street.
Can someone help me out with that exact location where that is? Is that down by the furniture store?
Which ones, Matt? The 2 Lake Nip properties?
Yeah.
Yeah.
5,
Those
5, and
those are on the list, just as I mentioned, just to make sure we vet everything, but essentially you can't get there from here.
Okay.
Almost. I mean,
Drive really fast, Matt.
if you can drive across water.
All right, so those are probably out, and we would probably never be able to entertain anybody that's out on the NIP section of town to give any land to access or anybody across the street for development. So that would kill that project. So I won't even entertain it. We'll cut. That's an easy cut, I guess.
Yeah.
Aldridge Road. Aldridge. Doesn't seem anything that's feasible. I'd assume the chief agrees with that. That's out.
Definitely, especially when the high school lets out.
0 Bedford Street. Anyone have any idea where that is?
I do not, sir.
That,
Is that down by the transfer station? I'm guessing it's maybe even the transfer station, actually.
It could be just before it. There's an access road that somebody was looking to build a go-kart track out behind.
Yeah, I remember.
That they may have lost. So that might be town-owned property at this time.
All
I
right.
don't,
I think it's
I'll
across
double
the
check.
barracks. Like right around Cycle Pros, right after Coins and Things.
But
Oh.
Chief, I believe you were correct. It's that like little go-kart path that they had back there. I'm trying to Google it now. Right next to the transfer station.
Well, that's surprisingly 5 acres down there. And to the chief's earlier conversation, is that too far down, chief?
Again, as in a three station, I think it leaves you a little bit more leeway. It is pretty far down. If we were going to look at something like that, the best place would probably be somewhere in this side of the Winter Street intersection, either senior center area or that area. So between Winter and Cottage. That would
Okay.
give us Winter going both sides to South and Summer and Conant. Would also give us access to the prison and the properties that are in that direction. The other thing we're thinking about is if you go a little bit further down, you go to Flag Street, run Flag Street to Auburn. Auburn hits 180 houses that are being put on the Cumberland Farms property.
Okay. So I think for this list, it's out.
For this list, if it's 3 stations, Matt, it would be there. We could utilize it.
All right. And there's
If
one
you're looking
further.
if you're looking for a grade, you're probably talking about a 60.
Mm.
We're looking at.
All right. Because I would assume that the next few, Aldridge Road and rear Apple Tree Circle and Cross Street, are also all out.
Both residential areas, Aldrich Road, you're going to run into the school. Coming back out, you're also going to run into all those residential properties. And that's usually backed up somewhere around Mary Lane, depending upon what time of day or night.
Okay. Cross Street, Heather Hills, all out. Heather Hills is in the boondocks. We have rear Vernon Street, 20 acres.
Rear Vernon by the golf course. Chase Farm, running the electric lines.
Yeah, looks like it's off of Beach Street, actually, unless that's another listing. Just screwing, Beach Street is separate. Rear Vernon Street, 131.7.
That comes to one of those things where you're so far out and there's not
Yeah,
the cut throughs to come back. There's not enough to make it onto main road to main road.
okay, I see it all now. It's way down on the Middleborough line. Okay. So then we have Bedford Street, 120. We talked about 101. 120 looks like it's further down, almost to the line, the river. It's about 11 acres on the right-hand side, just past Sylvia Engineering, it looks like.
It's way down.
So you'd be extreme south. So I would say that's not really a feasible site.
Agreed.
So when we come back to the list, we're really looking at 1185 Pleasant Street as being really an ideal lot. And it's much bigger than I thought. I don't know how much of it's buildable, and I guess we'll figure that out, but it's 9 acres according to this. And then of course, 47 Crescent Street. I think despite maybe some of the obstacles, we at least evaluate it since we have a very short list. and it's got the acreage that we would need. And maybe we don't have to recreate anything, but we can just make some roadway improvements, but we could figure that out. And I think that although it's publicly owned, not by the town, I defer to Michael, but I would think at this point, before we want to even entertain any more conversation than we've had with Bridgewater State, since they've indicated to this point that they're interested in doing something, we need to know if the site is actually feasible or not. So I think that adding that to the short list, Hale Street, is probably important for us to do. So that gives us 3 locations. Does anybody else have any feelings on any of the sites, such as Star Road or Elm Street? I know there's a general consensus that the chief's not interested in it. Do we cut the list at 3 and see what comes back in terms of whether or not those sites are feasible or not?
If
Right,
if we're looking to do feasibility, is feasibility looking at something like Spring Street where the parking is at the college? And if this station was to be given up and a portion of the parking was to be given up, could we look at Spring Street, corner of Spring and Broad? There are 2 parking lots smaller. One is owned by the college, one is owned by the town. And if we took a little bit away from the college, we could probably add to the town's lot. It could be the corner of Route 18 and Spring Street, or Spring and Broad Street. And it might give us that 1.5 acres of property that we're looking at. At the same time, it brings Central Business District. It is tough, but you also have Campus Plaza, all the stores in there you're covering. You have access to both High Street running 18 that way. The tough part would be coming back through, the center of town to, to help or support West Side Station or West Side response. That would be the most difficult. You could cut across, go through the parking area, come out onto Plymouth above Spring Street and go out that way by Hale. But it's just another option with a lot less hoops to jump through, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you like, I know that we've talked about that location before. I think that if we're entertaining conversations with the university, whether it's a land swap or whether it's, giving up Hale Street, I would say initially that I think the only reason BSU is interested in the Hale Street location is because currently it's an eyesore to them. So having anything built on that location is an improvement aesthetically for them. I know that the Spring Street lot is slated for a solar field, similar to what they just did in the Tower lot. So when you're talking about that corner piece, I guess my initial thought is the same concern you have. If you're trying to support West End apparatus, you're not getting through the center of town, at least quickly. You're not returning quickly either, because now you're sitting in traffic trying to get back. Where I feel like the Hale Street gives you an easy out. You have a good set of lights at Plymouth in summer, and next thing you know, you're into the center of town where you can, move traffic, I guess, better, or at least head down Main Street to center. So I like the idea. I like the idea of it just being seen and on a main road like Broad Street. But I wonder, when you look at the Broad Street development, there's also, stuff going on with the Perkins Foundry.
That was the other reason. That was the other reason for looking at it. If they put 160 units in there, and then another 53 on Broad Street, along with the college dormitories, we're kind of, you know what I mean? We're alleviating one problem and we're extending the other. I don't disagree, but again, the 3-station process, that's what buys it. The first units in would be the attack. The second units are the backup at that point.
Hey, Matt, just so it's on the record, I know a lot of people look at Hale Street not only as an eyesore for the town, but an eyesore for stations. Guys look at it like, I don't know. The one thing that talking with some members on the department is, I don't know if it's on the record with you, Matt, but I think Hale Street would probably be more utilized in our sense in a 3-station concept as the smaller of the two stations, where most likely you'd put, if in a perfect world, 1185 Pleasant Street worked out, you'd put the headquarters out on Pleasant Street, where you'd make probably a smaller two-bay station, if you will, just so you can utilize that space and not be so much congested. I just didn't know if that was on the record or if you had any ideas about that, Matt.
My thought concept, and I think with Chief Levy from the beginning, that the Hale Street location in terms of a downtown station would always be the smaller of what we built, that you just don't have the space. I think the idea of Hale Street allows us the only opportunity to keep equipment in the center of town. And, to the chief's point that he just made, we have, some of the largest dormitories right there downtown, right next door. And then, of course, planned construction, look at the building that's going up on Borough Ave, the private dorm that's being built. You've got that right there. That's all wood frame. And I'm presuming that anything that happens on the Perkins Foundry or on Broad Street is going to be similar wood frame construction. So
Yes, please
keeping
stop reminding us, Matt, about the wood frame. We're quite well aware. It keeps me awake at night.
But definitely keeping, a couple of pieces of equipment, whether there's administrative offices or not. I think that's when Brian comes back to us. Hey, this site is suitable for 50,000 square feet, for 10,000 square feet. Then we start putting plans together and say, okay, a third station on the west side, that is going to be a 20,000 square foot station, and Hale Street's going to be 10,000 square feet because that's all it can house. And we know that future expansion might happen at Station 2 or Station 3, probably long after I'm gone, but, at least that will help us to guide the process of whether or not we're building one more station or two. And I think that's the piece we have to realize that, if we get to a point that there's no place to build a fire station, I don't want to fold up the cards and go home and say, well, we couldn't build something downtown, so this project is dead. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to replace that building. So I think Hale Street is a really good option to come down Hale Street and be on Broad Street, sitting right in front of the proposed development now, taking a right and being at Perkins Street, and certainly getting back out to the west side of town and helping, whoever might need help out there. So I like the location, but I've been cautious that it turns out that it's not even feasible, that the site is just too long and narrow. And I'm not a designer, so I can't really envision what you could do. I mean, in my ideal setting, I'd like to see apparatus that's being pulled through and not backed in, and all of the bullet points that we've seen on modern fire station building. I don't want to sort of have to, not build the optimal fire station because we've tried to squeeze it in on some tiny lot that we probably never should have entertained to begin with. And this is why I've tried to keep my mind open in terms of, like, when you look at what we have available and not having to go out and look at the Cross Street location. Yeah, it's not ideal, but if we were to decide to build one much larger station, this Cross Street location, at least in my opinion, gives you full, pull-in bays. It gives you room to grow down the road if you needed out, sort of out. I look at like the garages that you have at Station 2 now, where you've already outgrown that station, have to put up, auxiliary buildings or sheds and stuff. So, but I think we're at a good point. I think unless somebody wants to look at another lot, we're really at 3 locations, 2 public property, and then looking at Hale Street in terms of feasibility. So 3 in total. And I think if they come back, I guess we'd hear from Brian, and, we look at this list harder, or we start having conversations about, what other land is there in town? And I don't want to overspeak with Michael, but in terms of, is there private property that we might have to purchase? Who knows? I hope that's not the route that we go.
So
When is the due date on the RFP, should I ask?
I think
I think it's 2
March.
weeks, I think, from today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
So Matt, if I could, I just, I would throw it out there and I agree with you. I mean, if, I think we have options that are going to be probably good options, but in the event that there is other property we should look at, even if it's not in response to an RFP, but if people have some idea about property that we should look at, just let me know and we'll go dig it up, find the owner, just see what the property looks like, try to do some kind of wetland assessment, and just judge it. So I throw that out there, just if there's anything that people are thinking about, certainly realistically probably off of Pleasant, just let me know.
So Michael, I'm not sure if we'd have to be so formal to do it, but would we want to make a motion to recommend those 3 lot locations and get a roll call vote on those to submit them to Brian officially as the sites to begin feasibility?
Yep, I think that would be absolutely appropriate.
Okay, does anybody want to do that?
Could you just review exactly which 3? I remember the 1185 Pleasant, and what were the other 2?
So we're talking about 1185 Pleasant Street, and this is in no particular order. Hale Street, although it's not on the list, certainly it's one of our, lots that we want to check for feasibility. And then 47-115, which is the Crescent Street softball fields. Other than that, I think everything that we've walked through on this list we've either eliminated for one reason or another. I don't see anything else that was feasible other than the pitch that I've made for Star Road, but I hear you loud and clear.
Has there been any thought about just tearing down headquarters and putting one right there again, something small?
So the short answer is yes, but we're trying to very carefully assess what the highest and best use is of that particular piece of property. That there's a value, I think, to the town for commercial / residential mixed use development on that piece. There's also, and if anybody wants it, I can share it. I just got the final report from the feasibility study that we did for Town Hall. And they're suggesting some reuse of that building that may or may not require a little bit of extra property, which would be, fire station property once it's gone. So really trying to focus on the highest and best use, what would get, people and pedestrian traffic into the downtown area to support, the anemic commercial properties that we've got now, and hopefully new ones that will come along.
And I certainly think that the redevelopment of that area is one of the positives that we have in terms of, getting this project approved, because it's sort of in the backdrop what the potential reuse of that site is. So I think that's helpful to us. Nobody's talking about really rebuilding in that site. I mean, obviously we'd like to stay downtown, but I think the financial opportunity for redevelopment of downtown and some of the plans that we have with traffic and commercial and residential construction, this is a big part of that. So does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. 1185 Pleasant Street, 47 Crescent Street, and the Hale Street property on the corner of Hale and Plymouth. We looked at for the 3 sites and evaluated.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, Josh, for a roll call.
Oh, Josh had to go, so
Oh,
I'm pressed into, so it's me, I'm pressed into service. All right, let's see, I'll just go by the screen. Matt?
yes.
Norm?
Yes.
No, Brian doesn't vote. Chief McDermott?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
John? I know you said yes. You got
Yes.
something going on with your audio. That's
Up and
weird.
down is yes. I decided no.
That's better. That's what I understand. Jimmy
Yes.
and Peter.
Yes.
All right, there you go.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Brian, appreciate your help on helping us guide us through that process. And Could you just talk a little bit about, what is this next step, what you're going to do to those sites and what we would expect in sort of a time frame coming back from you?
Yeah, I'll have everything done by tomorrow afternoon. What we look at, we gather all the available data that's in the assessor's office or to identify the project site. We'll go up there and view the site. We'll look at egress, access. We'll look at potential for wetlands on those sites. We're not soil scientists, but we actually look at the sites and any water bodies, any floodplain information that may be available. And then we test the site for size, parking requirements, building requirements, zoning requirements for setback, and actually we'll give you a proposed site plan on how we best utilize the site. So you'll see a diagram. You will not see a schematic floor plan, but you'll see a mass of a building with apparatus bay areas and parking areas. So it'll give you a chance to say, is this the highest and best use for that site? Will it work? And I would say, as far as a time frame, we should be able to do that in the next 3 to 3 weeks.
Okay, excellent.
Brian, can I ask one question? With the tower being the specialty apparatus out of all, the engines are all similar size.
Yes.
Is that something that's addressed in any one station or any all three stations? Obviously, you'd like to have all three stations be able to accommodate, is what I'm asking. Especially the Hale Street.
I think you'll be able to accommodate in either one of these facilities as far as depth of bay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, Chief, and I certainly sitting here thinking any stations that we build certainly you should be able to juggle your equipment around as needed in any of those stations and not find out later that we can't put a piece of equipment in because it's too large.
And we'll have to look at what the infrastructure is around these properties, the width of roads, turning radiuses, traffic signals, and everything that you've really talked about. But we'll put it into a document. We'll also give each one of these a score. We scored on a bunch of factors, about 12 factors. It's a score of 0 to 100. It's not real scientific. It's kind of our use of a scorecard to give it a grade. So you'll see the grade that we'll give it to.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Does anybody else have any questions for Brian? No. Well, I guess we could move on to sort of the next agenda item, and we've already, I guess, discussed it at some length, and that was, what are we going to do with 1, 2, 3 station concepts and impacts? And I guess I kind of threw it in there after having conversations with the chief about, staffing levels and what that would look like in the impact on the town. So I guess, I would say this, as far as the fire chief, to start thinking about having those conversations internally, what does a 2-station and 3-station impact look like to the town financially? What do you need to operate? What would that picture look like? I certainly wouldn't want to get to the town and we're building 3 stations, to your point, and we don't have a staffing plan or have any known impacts, because to Michael's point, residents are going to ask, they're smart enough to figure that out, that you're not going to build an extra station and not have it manned. And certainly I don't want to see it built and it not be open. So I think at least as part of this project, we'll know a lot when the feasibility stuff comes back for the sites, and that's going to help drive a lot of the conversation probably beyond that about coming to a final decision about what we would recommend to the town. I probably don't have much more to say than that. I know that we've already talked about it, so I'm not sure if Michael has anything to add, or I'm speaking out of term here.
No, I think you put it very well. And based on the discussion tonight, I will go back and have another discussion, hopefully in more particulars, and I'll certainly rope Brian into that discussion as well.
if I'm not mistaken, there was a study done early 90s by the town. I want to say it cost about $40,000, $50,000. I notice you're smiling, Matt. I think you've seen this study,
We're getting around to it.
which basically dictated the amount of personnel that we have now back then. So the need is there. Don't even question the need. We see it every day. It's the affordability of it, and if it would be passed. But that study could definitely be used as a benchmark from years past, and that was with one station, not two, not three. It was the same numbers we're dealing with right now.
I can share. I think I have a copy of that, Chief. I'll share that with Brian.
I do too.
I'm sure.
Chief, I would say too, it might be helpful even in your own network. You know, there might be towns around us that have gone through a similar process. You know, I look at a town like Easton, and I believe they have 3 fire stations. But, you know, maybe you could help us as a committee come back with some information about some of the challenges that they had to overcome, or maybe, you know, in terms of planning, how we'd present this to the town. You know, what are some feedback from them, things that worked, things that didn't work, things people want to hear, don't want to hear, to help us, you know, make that case to the town if in fact that's where we got to go. And so, does anybody else have anything else before I move on to the last? We're hitting 1 hour and 15. I hate to hold people up more than an hour. No. Okay. So the last thing on the agenda was really just to the, again, the earlier point, myself and Michael have talked, we are trying to get a website on the town's landing page set up. Obviously that's been challenging with COVID. Brad and his team, you know, have to do so much in terms of the COVID page and, you know, all the employees going remote or coming back to the office. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but it is our plan to get that up there along with a managed Facebook page. I see the comments when I post the agenda to my Facebook page, and, you know, you get people talking, but honestly, that's what we need. We don't want to come around in the fall with a plan that nobody has heard of and nobody has been talking. We want to see what people are saying, what they're commenting about it, so we can address those concerns in any presentations that we might do to the council, or, you know, if we get through COVID and we make some public presentations, we want to have that information. So we are working on it. Michael's offered to run with that with the town, but, you know, we just want to give everybody a heads up. We are trying to get something public up there and get all the documents that we've got to this point, including the feasibility and design, and every document that we get, you know, get those up on the website so people have it and they have a place to go to look at it. So with that being said, I would just say to open it up to anybody else has any comments. If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would only add that, Matt, that anybody that has pictures, you know, pictures tell 1,000 words. So I have some pictures of the inside of the station, but certainly if anybody has you know, good pictures that represent, you know, what's existing, and actually also history. You know, if anybody has some historical photographs, I know Steve Rogan, talked to him a few times. He's got a ton of old photos that would be, you know, kind of capture people's interest, if nothing else, and get them onto the page and dig a little deeper.
In the history room, second floor of the library.
Matterport for you guys. Do you guys know what Matterport is?
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Like, if you get a site, I can get a Matterport done, and people click on that Matterport, they'll go, oh.
That would be great, because that would allow them a visual to walk through the building. That would be fantastic.
So it's like a virtual tour?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's pictures really. I'll let Ken, go ahead, Ken.
It will put the floor plan of the chief, of the station chief, and anybody can just click their mouse and it will take them to that room, and they do a 360 literal image of the room. And then they can click in another room, so they can see every nook and cranny and every inch of that building on their own time. Anybody that has a mouse can do it.
Wow.
That would be the most powerful way to show anybody in the public what the station looks like.
In the second floor of the library, the pictures of this station, the cornerstones that set this station were 1848, built into 1850, if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
which is where this grew from what we're dealing with.
Yeah, just let me know. I can definitely get that set up.
Perfect.
Ken, that would be awesome if you could do that. That's really incredible stuff, and that would be really great to get up on the website.
Yeah, the owner of the ServPro in town is a really good personal friend of mine as well, and he was a firefighter for about 17 years in Carver, so he'd be happy to help on his own time to do that for the town.
What's his first name?
Mike.
Okay. Yeah, we had somebody come out to BSU and do this similar thing. It's incredible. But yeah, that'd be awesome. It'd be very helpful, I think, for people to see it, because they can move at their own pace, unlike a video where you're stopping and starting. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, just
really,
let
really
me know,
good.
and I'll set it up.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ken.
Matt,
Yes.
just to touch on challenges too, just to give you a heads up, I didn't forget about the last time in the meeting. I reached out to the Needham Union president. He's going to get me some material. He actually offered to be on a Zoom if you guys want him to, just to talk about challenges. They built two brand new stations at the same time. They just moved into them, so
Wow.
that could be a question as well. Obviously, if everything the stars align for us, that could be a possibility. So.
Awesome. Thank you. If no one else, I'll just open it up to the public again. I see Carlton. He's patiently been waiting.
Thank you guys for great discussion. It would have helped the public if you'd have had a map up that you could show those locations on. I'm looking forward to the GIS presentation where you layer in all this stuff. I'm assuming Brian will be looking at that in some way. I used that for dredge material disposal site alternative determinations years ago. I'm not dating myself, but it was years ago. The only other thing is I'm a little concerned that you've limited yourself to 3 sites when you're looking for 3 sites. And so I heard the arguments on 5825 Elm Street, but that's an 8-acre parcel that has a little bit of wetlands in it, but it's mostly upland. And I think you may want to reconsider at some point having a 4th option out on the west side of town. So that's my only concern. Matt, I'm sure you've shared the work I did on the 1185 Tool Park. I've mapped out the topography and everything so people can get. There's way over 2.5 acres of upland in that site. So thank you guys. Good job.
Thank you, Carlton. We appreciate that. And I think that if we come back and we hear from Brian that, these are just not feasible sites, then, I'm trying to make sure that the chief is happy with the direction that the stations are going in terms of location. And I hope not to get to the point where there are no options and we have to look at some of these undesirable locations such as Elm Street or, something down on Route 18. I don't want to go there. So I'm hopeful that these sites are actually really good sites. You've done some homework yourself personally, and that he comes back and, they're feasible sites for what we're looking at, and we can move to the next step. But we'll have to address that certainly if the reports aren't good.
Thank you.
Hearing nothing else, I'll wait for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
I
adjourn.
want to watch Kenny fall asleep.
I got 2
Second.
screaming kids down there that won't prevent that.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
I guess we got to go through that, Mike. No.
You know what? I'm going to use my prerogative and say we're not
Nice.
going to do a roll call for adjourning the meeting.
All right.
Excellent.
Monday.
Thank
just
you,
went to
everybody.
Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.